You're listening and watching the Renegade River Show. My name is Mike Hewitt, and in the studio with me today, my guest is Dave Agema, who is Michigan's Republican National Committee man to the RNC, and on the line with us is Norm Hughes. Norm is chair of the Michigan Conservative Plan and also Michigan Freedom to Work. Before we get into National Committee man and all that, please tell us a little bit about your background. Who are you and how did you...
Well, it's kind of ironic how I got to where I am. I never anticipated doing it. Quite frankly, I didn't like politicians for most of my life because when they spoke, when they were done, I was never sure what they said. So my background as a military officer and a fighter pilot, what we said is what we did. So it's quite different. But basically, I went to a Christian school my whole life. My dad was a factory worker. I was the only one of 4 kids to go to college. I went to Calvin College, as a matter of fact. And then during the war in Vietnam, when it kicked up, they were in need of pilots, and that was always a dream of mine to be a pilot. So I applied to the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marines, and to my great surprise, because I wasn't a straight-A student, I got selected into all 3, and I picked the Air Force. My brother was a Marine. He said, don't go into the Marines. You don't want to be a maggot. I don't know what he meant by that, but that's what he said. So I picked the Air Force because my brother said, hey, they got better facilities, better food, and everything else. And in the Air Force, actually, it's the Air Force officers that fly the airplanes that do the fighting, as opposed to the Army and so forth. You got the NCOs mostly that do the fighting. So I joined the military and got married 2 weeks before I went in. My wife said she would never marry anybody until they had the military out of the way, so she didn't quite hold true to that. We got married 2 weeks later. I went in the military. So I went through pilot training, and that was very difficult. I didn't know an aileron from a rudder. I just knew it looked cool. I thought I'd like to do it. So what ended up happening is by the time I graduated from pilot training, I could pick any airplane I wanted to fly because it was based on your standings in pilot training. So I picked an F-4 Phantom, which at the time would be like your newer airplanes today. That was the hottest thing we had. And then I flew that for several years, volunteered to go to Korea out of that airplane in an OV-10. And I had to leave my wife and my 6-week-old daughter home for a year. Then I came back, and then I got involved with training at Patrick Air Force Base. I moved about 11 times in 7.5 years in active duty. And then what happened is, through all those years of flying, pulling G's and so forth, I started having a few back issues. And what happened is I had a ruptured disc. I played basketball, church league basketball. It's kind of rough once in a while, you know. I ripped the hamstring almost off the bone, and I got a ruptured disc in my back, and I got a hernia all at the same time. And 11 surgeries later, it put me to the point where after flying with American for about 20, I didn't state that. I got hired by American Airlines in 78. So most of my life from 78 on, I had 2 jobs. One as an airline pilot, and the other one in the Air National Guard, because I got out of active duty and got into the Air National Guard. And then a little later, I got out of the Air National Guard and did recruiting for the Air Force Academy. So I did that for about 25 years with them and flew with the Guards as well. And then basically what happened is a doctor one day said, you've had too many surgeries. You need to be on a few medications for your back. So he basically ripped my medical, so I couldn't fly anymore. And so then I helped run a machine shop at Butterball Farms. And the interesting thing about that was I just met the guy. We got to be friends, and when he found out that I wasn't going to be flying anymore, he said, how about helping me start a machine shop? I said, I don't know anything about a machine shop. I had gotten a master's degree while I was in the military, so I had a bachelor's in economics and a master's in business management and supervision. So I helped him set that up for a little bit. And after 2 years, Bill Van Riggermotor, my predecessor at the time, said he was going to be retiring, so I talked to him. And I decided to run for state representative. And I talked to him, and I thought, well, I might as well try that. Tried everything else. Might as well try to get in there and make a difference. So I ran against 9 other opponents, so there was 10 of us running in that race. And I won that one handily just because I think that my opinion was I just want to get in there. I just want to eliminate onerous laws and taxes. And I want to make Michigan a place for business that can grow so people can get jobs. So I filled 3 terms of that out. That's the max you can do, 3 2-year terms. And then as I was getting ready to leave, about May of my last year, then I was actually contacted by Club for Growth, and they wanted me to run against Upton. I said, I don't live in that district. He said, you don't have to. And that surprised me. I said, no, I don't want to do that. They don't know me there. They said, yes, they do. So I said, no, I didn't want to do that. So I kind of flipped them over to Hogendijk, and Hogendijk decided to run. And then they called me in one day and asked me if I'd be willing to run for RNC. So I said, what's RNC? What does that do? And I said, what does it pay? They said, nothing. Oh, that's interesting. What's the expenses? Nothing. So why do I want to do this? He said,
What's the upside?
Yeah. And what ended up happening there is they went through a whole list of things that you do. And one of the things that really caught my attention is you basically help set the tenor and the tone and the platforms and so forth of what the Republican Party is going to be and do. So when they said that, and they said you could help get others like yourself that are fiscal, moral, and constitutional conservatives elected, I said, okay, I'll do that. So I ran.
Tell me this, what rank did you leave the military at?
Lieutenant Colonel.
You're a lieutenant colonel?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a little bit of difference between lieutenant colonel and being in politics?
Oh, yeah. But the higher you get in the military, it becomes more political.
This is probably the gift.
As you can probably see, how many senior ranking officers were fired by the Obama administration just in the last year. It's been just amazing.
Last count, I think it was a combination of generals and admirals, 9. At least that's what I saw, and that was looking below the general admiral line. So a bunch of them.
Oh, no, there's a lot more than 9.
Are
You're
there?
over 100.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
So he's just cleaning house.
Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. That'll be a topic for another show, I bet. Tell me this on a personal basis. You got kids?
I got kids. What happened in the military, our first child was born dead. The military at the time was giving these pills that prevent morning sickness, and they found out later that caused the fetus to die. And 2 weeks before it was due to be born, the child died. It was a female. And then when we got out of the military and got hired by American Airlines and I was flying in the Guards, then we had a daughter. Then I had a son. And then what happened is my sister ended up dying of cancer, and she was married to an unfit father, so we ended up taking her 10-year-old and raising her. So she calls us mom and dad. So as of today, I've got 10 grandkids, which is pretty interesting.
You're one more ahead of me, and I'm sorry for your losses. And at the same time, by the way, I want to thank you for your service.
It's my pleasure.
Tell me this though: when looking now in your position as the national committee man, how do you? I understand they kind of, I don't know what the word would be, motivated you or asked you to do it, but from the time you say, yeah, I want to become a national committee man, to actually, how do you get to be one?
Well, you're elected by the delegates of the state. So what you do is you drive all around the state. And by the way, when I was doing this, I was still on appropriations as a state representative. So I was putting in 10 hours a day minimum as a state representative. And then I would get in my truck and they'd send a few people with me while they're driving me where I got to be and speak. Then I'd be making phone calls. So you basically tell them what you stand for. And obviously I had won the award for being the most conservative legislator in the House of Representatives. And I told them what I stood for and where I wanted to lead the party. And based on that, then they have a convention. At the convention, the delegates vote. And I ran against an incumbent, Salanusis, and I think it was real close, not quite, a little under 70%, roughly 70-30.
Okay, wow, very, very impressive. Tell me this: you mentioned delegate. That's a precinct delegate, is that right?
Yeah, delegates that are assigned to the state.
So,
state conventions.
But those folks start out, as I understand it, being involved in a county political party. Right. They literally have to be on a ballot and win to become a precinct delegate, and then beyond that, from the county level, they may end up having an opportunity to serve at the county convention as a state level delegate.
That's correct. That's pretty accurate.
Okay, so of that group, plus or minus 70% voted for you.
That's correct.
That's a pretty resounding victory.
Yeah, I think there was a notion there that the party needs to be moved a little bit to the right. Matter of fact, when I went and talked to each group at the convention center, that was my message. I said, the party's moved too far to the left. We need to move a little bit further to the right. And I said, that's what I wanted to do. And I wanted to get fiscal, moral, and constitutional conservatives elected into office because I think they're going to lead us in the right direction.
Sounds like what you just described, at least let me tell you how I interpret it. Sounds like who took you to office were Reagan conservatives. Is that
I would agree.
That's something you would agree with?
I would agree.
Recently, there's been a little bit of pushback against you, I think would be the words, or there's certainly been some critique of you. What's that all about, Dave?
Well, I think that's part of, if you want to get to the basis of it, I think it's a push by liberal elements, either outside or some inside the Republican Party, that want to eliminate free speech. I think that's the biggest issue here. But I think it was some of the posts I made. And by the way, it weren't my posts. I posted some other articles that other people had written, and for various reasons, basically to clarify what our policy is in the Republican Party. So I was trying to post these things to clarify the difference between us and the Democrats, and the fact that we have a platform, and our platform far exceeds the Democrat platform.
Would I be wrong if I characterize it to say that there are elements within the Republican Party that would like to push the Reagan conservatives out of the party? Is that a fair statement to make, or am I saying it?
I think there's some of that in the party. I think there's some in the party that think that they have to go left to get a larger tent. And my attitude towards that is if you go too far left, you will lose your base. And I think the other aspect there is you can't get to the left of the Democrat Party.
I got to tell you, when I look at this topic and when I'm listening to you today talk, in fact, I've said this a number of times even on this show recently, I'm reminded of Reagan's 1976 speech when he talked about bold colors, not pale pastels, that we have to define a difference between us and the political ideology that we oppose. And so when I'm watching this latest, well, let me stop myself for a minute. Norm, you're with us. You have a little bit of experience both long-term in politics and also from the Reagan Revolution. How do you see this?
Well, I've seen now, Mike, three different purges of conservatives from the Republican Party. The Michigan Republican Party basically has been a more moderate, even leftward-leaning party from time to time. We've had governors previously who were really Democrat in philosophy who didn't appreciate the Reagan people in the Republican Party. They labeled him a Neanderthal and a bunch of other uncomplimentary names and tried to shove the conservatives out of the party. I think we're going through that again. We're seeing a very strong group of, actually three different groups in Michigan, running precinct delegates against the conservative precinct delegates, running legislative candidates against the conservatives, running them even against a couple conservative congressmen. So we're seeing a real big pushback by the leftward-leaning people in the party. I would remind them that when you look at people like Bob Dole and McCain and Romney and moderates just don't get elected. Reagan's clear principles, very clear, articulate, conservative principles, crystal clear, not fuzzy like the moderate faction seems to be, only won 49 of the 50 states. I mean, we had extraordinary success with the conservative message, and I think the Republican Party would be well to return to that so they can distinct themselves clearly from the Democratic Party and the move towards socialism.
No, and I want to, just so listeners know, just so the audience knows, you've got a little bit of experience in that. I think if I recall right, you served three different senior policy positions within the Reagan administration. Is that correct?
I did. My first assignment was with the Department of Energy, where I ran the Conservation and Renewable Energy Program, cut $1 billion out of a $1.8 billion budget the first year. There was just an extraordinary amount of waste and fraud and duplication and competing with the private sector that was not furthering the knowledge that the nation needed to be able to enable the entrepreneurs to be able to grow, and for us to economize on. I mean, we're spending $300 to save a barrel of oil that cost $18 at the time. So there was an awful lot of waste and fraud. The second assignment was a national security spot, the Continuity of Government program, and the third one was a presidential commission where I served with 10 cabinet officers. So yes, I also was on the White House Speakers Bureau. I really liked Ronald Reagan. He had his head on straight. He knew what he stood for. He was a very devout man, but didn't wear it on his sleeves, and he had a way of expressing himself and rallying the country, and it was just phenomenal to see.
It's always amazing to me that there are elements in America, frankly, beyond the Republican Party and certainly within it, where if I say I'm a fiscally responsible, constitutional conservative Christian, I'm suddenly painted as an extremist. I think, no kidding. Those are founding principles. Those aren't something that I just dreamed up to be different or to be radical. Those to me are the staples that have caused America to be great. You know, and I mentioned that 76 speech that Reagan gave, and I remember the little bit of uproar that went thereafter with what in the heck is he talking about? This is how we win. And then two humongous victories, and yet now we're looking at a party that has a difficult time looking in its own rearview mirror to determine how to chart a course forward.
The president, Ronald Reagan, was just masterful at allying enemies. I mean, he had a way of clearly cutting through all the Washington BS and getting down to the facts of the matter, and he rallied the people. This is a strength that Abe Lincoln had too. He had the ability to intuit what the people were thinking, and he spoke about how to change public policy, you have to change public opinions. So I would encourage your listeners who happen to be constitutional conservatives who believe in limited government to watch their politicians, communicate with their politicians. When money has become such a big thing in politics now that politicians get changed by the need for money to get reelected. As a matter of fact, recently they doubled the amount of spending or giving limits that people can give. So you got big money involved in politics, and people who invest big money expect a return on it. So they whipsaw politicians to take positions that are favorable to them. Everything from movie subsidies to block grants for their businesses to, on the west side there, you had a number of examples of huge amounts of money putting into solar industries or battery industries that utterly failed, and the technology and the money went to other nations. So money is just too big in politics.
Norman, it feels like you've described three purges, I think is the word you used, that you've seen in your experience. It feels like, if I'm counting right, this is the fourth purge against Reagan conservatives. But frankly, all of the things that you articulated right now are the things that I see that Dave has done. Was that something you would agree with?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And Dave is just a victim. Dave is in a very important position for the conservative movement. He is the highest-ranking Republican in the state of Michigan with this philosophy, and if they can knock him out, then they weaken the rest of us, and the feeding frenzy starts. So I would agree that Dave has expressed a couple things insensitively, but you don't shoot your friends. You work with them. You counsel them. You help them. And so we're seeing people that are just trying to further their purge by trying to knock him out.
That's how I see it. Folks, we need to go to a break. We'll be right back on that note.
Are you one of the many Americans who undergo CPAP or BiPAP therapy? Replacing your supplies every 3 to 6 months is critical, as bacteria will build up and worn-out straps cause leaks. Call Allied Medical Supply Network and speak to an expert agent who will set up a schedule for your supplies to be delivered right to your door at little or no cost to you. Call Allied Medical Supply Network today and rest easy.
Call 800-284-2512. That's 800-284-2512.
This is a national health alert from Worldwide Medical. Are you on Medicare? And do you suffer from back or knee pain? Have you tried injections, pain pills, or even had or considered surgery? If these examples apply to you or a loved one in pain, stop. There is a better way. You could qualify to receive a pain-relieving back or knee brace at little or no cost to you. You'll receive free information, free delivery, and all the insurance paperwork is handled for free. Best of all, there is little to no cost to you for the braces. Call 1-800-282-6789 to get all the details. It takes just a couple of minutes. These amazing braces have helped thousands of people in severe pain, and you may qualify to have yours delivered directly to your door at little or no cost to you. Call 1-800-282-6789 right now. This may be the most important call you make all year. That's 800-282-6789. Call now.
Welcome back to the Renegade River Show. My name is Mike Hewitt, and in the studio with me today is Dave Agema, who is Michigan's Republican National Committee man to the RNC, and on the line with us is Norm Hughes, who is the chair of the Michigan Conservative Plan and also Michigan Freedom to Work. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Listen, when we went to break, we were kind of talking about where we're at with a little bit of pushback against Reagan conservatism, and most of it was Norm and I. Dave, what's your take on that?
Well, I think there's a movement within the Republican Party, the Tea Party groups, iCaucus and others, that the party is slipping to the left.
Okay.
And I think some of the people are upset with that, and they feel like the party has left them. They haven't left the party. So, my aspect, the reason I got involved with all this is the fact that I spent 26 years in the military, and part of that was I had to swear to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And matter of fact, all your legislators make that same claim. So to me, the Republican Party represented the most closely aligned to my beliefs: fiscal responsibility. We have moral values. We're going to believe in the Constitution. We want to make sure that the people that are working out there keep as much of their money as possible. And when I was a state representative, I was on appropriation. And just like Norm had mentioned, that caught my ear on the last segment, how much money he saved. That's exactly the way I looked at appropriations when I was a state rep. In fact, one of the issues was I noticed right away, I knew it years ago, but one of the biggest ripoffs to the taxpayer was always the food stamp program. Now, that sounds kind of harsh, but it's really been abused. And then the bridge card. So I went into that, and I basically got a hold of the new director of DHS and said, look, we got to change 2 sentences in the law, because you got many people that are not poor abusing this just by signing up on a kiosk. And then she called me back and says, you're right, the governor agrees, we're going to change that. So what we ended up doing, they did actually, DHS, they started looking into who was signing up, and we found that about 30,000 college kids, that's just college kids, that's not even on the DHS portion of people outside of college, were on food stamps or bridge cards that shouldn't be, that were not poor. That saved the state about $6 million a month, about $72 million a year.
Just to stop you for a minute, I want to make sure that I understand and folks watching do.
Sure.
What you're telling me is that it's not necessarily trying to boot people off the program that need assistance, but we're talking about stopping people who are causing fraud against the Michigan taxpayer.
That's exactly correct. And what they got to understand is the more people that use fraud to get on, it means less money available for people that really need it. That's the key.
Right.
So I want to thank Norm for his same type of attitude when you look at budgets. And every budget I looked at, or in every bill, matter of fact, when I was a state rep, I looked at a bill and it says, okay, what does this do? And I'd always ask, does this raise a tax, a fine, or a fee? If it did, if I could find it, I was usually, almost always, off that bill. And the second thing I looked at is, okay, what does this bill do for business? If it doesn't raise a tax, fine, or fee, is it good for business or is it bad for business? For example, when the Michigan business tax came up, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I can fly supersonic airplanes, and I got a master's degree. I looked at that and I thought, let me see. We're going to tax businesses on gross receipts, and then we're going to have a surcharge on top of this. Who's going to want to come to Michigan if you could have a multi-million-dollar business in sales, lose $1 million, and still owe the state of Michigan $500,000, $800,000? It's insanity. So I voted against that. I think there were only about 14 of us in the whole legislature that voted against that. And when it out happening, we were the terrible 14 that voted against that, because even the Chamber of Commerce wanted us to vote for what they thought was a good deal. But about 2 months later, we were the fabulous 14 because they realized this was a bad bill. So that's what I've done there. You want to get me into some of the other principles that I pushed?
I'm absolutely. I'm looking to see who Dave is and what it is you've been working on.
Well,
that's exactly right.
You got to remember, too, that my goal has always been, in the position I'm in now, once I got out of the state representative job, I think the Tea Party and other conservative groups kind of grabbed me. And they said, Dave, you're one of the most conservative guys there. Please run for something else. So what I ended up doing when I got to the RNC, I just sat down one day and I thought, what are some of the core principles that distinguish us from the Democrat Party? And I wrote them down. And lo and behold, I sent them in. I said, I want to pass these core principles. Well, in some fashion or another, they're already in our platform.
Right.
But I wanted to go ahead and emphasize it at this time so people could see there really is a difference. So there are 5 core principles that they passed 100% at the RNC, both in the committee and then with the 168 members as a whole when they come together.
When you say 100%, do you mean they pass them 100% or they unanimously pass them?
Unanimously
That's an important
voted.
difference.
Yes.
Okay.
So basically what happened is I said one of the first things I wanted to make a distinction between the Democrat platform and the Republican platform is the Republican platform, and I'm paraphrasing here, says that we believe our rights come from God. It's the government's job to protect those rights. Democrat platform at the last convention they had tried to take every mention of God out of their platform. And if you recall, there was all shouting and all that. I thought that was quite a stark difference. The second thing is, I obviously as a military officer and a hunter, Second Amendment. We believe it's your right to bear arms. So what's happening here with the Democratic side, or the Democrat side? They're basically making it more and more difficult to own a weapon. I think their ultimate goal is to take your weapons. I really fear any society that does not have weapons. You are now at the mercy of your government. I think it's good that the government has a slight fear of the populace. So there's a big difference between Republicans and Democrats on that issue. Another issue that's in the Republican platform is we believe in legal immigration, not illegal immigration. And if I can just tell a quick story here, I was even called one day because I was running an E-Verify bill, which I couldn't get passed, didn't have the support to do it, had a lot of people opposing it. But an individual called me out of Holland, Michigan, and he had an accent, he was Hispanic, and he said, Dave, can you please get this passed? I said, well, what's going on? He said, well, they're putting me out of business. He says, what do you mean? He says, well, my own people are putting me out of business. They're paying him $5, $6 an hour, and he was in the landscaping business. And he said, they're going to put me out of business. I said, can you come and testify in Lansing? And there was silence for a portion of time. And then he said, I can't. I said, why not? In his exact words, he says, they'll kill me. He said, I can't do that. I said, how about if I put a bag over your head or put you in a separate room? anything like that to testify. He says, I can't do it. But you got to get that passed. He says, and my reason for this legal immigration issue was every time, and then when I ran that machine shop for Butterball Farms, I had the same incident happen there. I hired 6 individuals that were really good workers, and Hispanics are good workers. They really are. I hired them, and I paid a 38% override so I could look at them for 3 months, trained them on a mill and a lathe. I went to hire them. We do the checks. They were illegal. So there's 6 jobs that I wasted money on, but they were illegal. That meant some Michigan citizen did not get that job. So that Michigan citizen, perhaps, is now on welfare or unemployment or loses his house. So I called up the temp agency, and I said, don't send me anymore. You're fired. I'm going to go somewhere else. So I called another temp agency. I said, I need some guys down here tomorrow. They sent me 2. During that day, we immediately did a check. They were illegal. So I called them in the office, and I said, well, I can't keep you. You're illegal, aren't you? He says, yes, but right down the street, there's 200 of us working there. Nobody's complaining. Now, that's my point. I'm not against people coming here legally, but they're taking jobs that Michigan citizens need. And that was right in the middle of, when things were starting to get bad. So legal immigration, not illegal immigration. And the Obama administration obviously is going for amnesty. And if you look at the amnesty program, in 10 years, if they get to take their relatives, their wives, their kids, they said in 10 years you could have up to 30 million more people here, which would definitely affect jobs and so forth. So it would lower some of our, make unemployment worse. The fourth thing was traditional marriage. The Republican Party believes in traditional marriage, not homosexual marriage, and Obama is going out pushing that even to other nations. And the last one is sanctity of life. We believe in the sanctity of life. We don't believe in abortion, but the Democrat platform does. So those are the 5 core values that got passed unanimously.
Tell me something, and on the homosexual marriage issue, and first off, let me offer my own position. I'm a little bit different. I'm a Jeffersonian. I don't think that this is my personal belief, that the government, I believe in marriage, by the way, but to me it's a faith-based issue. It's not something that should be of the ward of the government. That's my own stand on it. So to me, it's about what a person's religion is. But taking that aside, the way I understand those 5 positions that you just articulated, and specifically that one, and the way I understand your personal beliefs are, they're exactly in keeping with the popular vote that took place in Michigan here just recently within the last few years. Am I wrong on that?
No, you're correct. I think that they voted that marriage is between a man and a woman.
What's getting me on this, and by the way, I'm with Norm on this when he said in the first segment that the way you said what you said was not necessarily an appropriate thing, and I'm not trying to beat you up.
Sure.
But what I am saying is that what your meaning seemed to be was in keeping with, what was it, 58% of the public that voted in favor?
I don't remember the exact number.
59%.
59%.
I think to myself, how did we get from that in a very recent time to where when a person says what that said,
Yeah.
they're taken to the woodshed?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I think Hollywood plays a huge portion on setting and changing the culture. And I think now in the schools, what they're taught as early as they're taught and what's happening is just the opposite of what the intent was. For example, when they had sex ed, that was supposed to prevent pregnancies. How's that been working out so far?
Not so much.
Not so much. So I think we have the media against us on that. We have a culture that's growing up in schools that are teaching them something else. And I think you even have some schools that are teaching the homosexual lifestyle, how to be homosexual, or some sort of class that they're teaching that we're paying for. So I think the culture is moving in that direction based on the education in Hollywood. The question is, what are the results if we do that? And I think there's studies in Denmark, Netherlands, Switzerland, and so forth that you can look up. I don't want to give you my opinion because then somebody will holler, oh, Dave says this, Dave says that. Just look it up and see what the ramifications were when they went that route. And to me, the basic unit of government is the family. If you start destroying the family unit in a nation, the nation starts to crumble from within. Look at the Greek Empire. Look at the Roman Empire. And so that's I'm trying to protect America. I'm not trying to be, angry at any particular group.
Now, it feels like to me you're saying these things with conviction based on your personal faith. Is that true?
It's based on my personal faith, but it's also based on statistics found in the countries that have done that.
Well, but the reason I wanted to draw that out is that, to me, these are the ideals that are exactly what the purpose of the First Amendment was. I mean, exactly what the purpose of the First Amendment was. And so while there are some folks that may take the position you just articulated as being intolerant, to me, it doesn't have anything to do with all of that. It's what your personal beliefs are, and that's what the First Amendment is for.
Mike, let me jump in here for a
please
moment
do, Norm.
if I can.
Sure.
We have a long, successful history in America, 226 years now, believing on a set of principles. And when you look at these, Ben Franklin said it, man will ultimately be governed by God or by tyrants.
Yep.
And John Adams saying our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people.
Exactly.
It is totally inadequate to the government of any other. You got Washington saying that nothing happened without the hand of what he called the providential agency. And so we have a long history of a nation and a nation's set of principles, founding principles, that has worked, that has made America the freest, the self-governed, a total success theologically, philosophically, and economically. And we have people now who would destroy that. We have to recognize the fact that that's true. We've got a president who would change us into a socialist oligarchy. And so these founding principles are really pretty important. And as far as the attacks on Dave go, I'm reminded of what Abe Lincoln said, that if I were to try to read much less answer all the attacks made on me, the shop might as well be closed for any other business. You do the best you can. You say what you mean. And the vast majority of the constituency that elected Dave concur with what he says. This is not anti-gay. This is not anti-Muslim. This is a situation where promiscuous people, be they heterosexual or homosexual, or are at greater risk. The statistics show that. Maybe Dave doesn't have to keep talking about that, but that happens to be a fact. And so if you care about the health care of this country, if you care about the well-meaning of people, and if you are now a father and a grandfather like all three of us are, you want to counsel the next generations on some things you've learned in life. And that's precisely the reason we elected Dave. And so I don't think he has to change his beliefs one iota. It's wrong for a party to ask for him to do that. And I think he has to go out there and say it in such a way where it resonates with the electorate, and I think it does. I mean, 69% of the delegates threw out an incumbent who was endorsed by the governor, endorsed by the state party chair, and nominated by the attorney general. The vast majority of the delegates who represent the Republican Party in the precincts and the delegates they elected to represent them at the state believe in what Dave stands for. So you've got a few people who are trying to do politically correct, doing things the Republican Party would never dream of doing, like passing Medicaid expansion and putting 470,000 more people at the expense of our kids and grandkids, driving up the debt. I mean, you look at what they're doing nationally. In the last quarter, they raised the debt $583 billion and recently just passed another $1.1 trillion increase. And this is Republicans coinciding with the Democrats on this. So there's a need for somebody to prick the conscience of those who would turn us into a socialist state, and we need somebody who would stand up for the principles of Adams and Franklin and Lincoln and Washington and Madison and Hamilton and our other fathers who looked at all the different types of government throughout the world and throughout history and determined to try a bold experience in self-government, and gave us the freest nation in the world, the most successful economically in the world, the greatest opportunity for more people, the shining city on the hill, and Dave stands for those principles, and those who would tear us down would tear him down. And I think it's pretty simple. So we need to bolster Dave up, counsel him, advise him, give him the opportunity to represent and speak boldly for us as he has, and I think that's the plan going forward.
I think the key word is boldly. And again, I hearken back to Reagan's speech in '76, but you mentioned Medicaid expansion along that in your comments, and I got to tell you, I've used that ever since the legislative vote this recently here in Michigan to kind of measure where the state party is at. Roughly a third of the Republican legislative body joined with the Democrats. And the irony with that is that roughly two-thirds didn't, and those are probably the two-thirds that helped support Dave to become the Republican National Committee man. That's exactly the math we're dealing with. He won by 70%. Roughly 30% probably wasn't thrilled at all, and roughly 30% wanted the Medicaid expansion, etc. I mean, there's certainly I mean, that's the math of the pushback.
The dynamics of this, Mike, is that the vast majority of the Republicans believe in these conservative principles: less government,
exactly,
responsible government, economically frugal government, letting people do what they can do with less government interference, no government spying on us, and this kind of stuff. I think the voters get it. Certainly, the majority of the Republican grassroots get it. The people that are voting Republican and supporting the candidates, knocking on doors and making the phone calls to the Republican Party, they get it. The only thing is you've got certain special interests with big money involved trying to push the party. I mean, I was there during the lobbying on the Medicaid expansion in the Senate. We stopped it in June. It came back, and it kept coming back and kept coming back. I asked a friend of mine who happens to be the lobbyist for the Michigan Medical Society, and he said, basically, the governor asked us to do it. So
no question was going to go through. John, Norm, I got to stop you there. We're going to go to a break. We will pick up when we come back. Thank you very much, guys.
Are you one of the many Americans who undergo CPAP or BiPAP therapy? How often are you replacing your masks and hoses? Replacing your CPAP or BiPAP supplies every 3 to 6 months is critical to an effective therapy. Bacteria will build up, making you sick, and worn-out straps cause leaks and are just plain uncomfortable. Let Allied Medical Supply Network help. Call Allied Medical to speak to an expert agent that will determine which supplies you need and will set up a schedule for your fresh, brand-name supplies to be delivered right to your door, right when you need them. Shipping's absolutely free, and you may qualify to receive supplies at little or no cost to you. That's right, there's no driving around town or remembering when to order. Call Allied Medical Supply Network today and rest easy.
Call 800-560-7631. That's 800-560-7631.
This is a national health alert from Worldwide Medical. Are you on Medicare? And do you suffer from back or knee pain? Have you tried injections, pain pills, or even had or considered surgery? If these examples apply to you or a loved one in pain, stop. There is a better way. You could qualify to receive a pain-relieving back or knee brace at little or no cost to you. You'll receive free information, free delivery, and all the insurance paperwork is handled for free. Best of all, there is little to no cost to you for the braces. Call 1-800-282-6789 to get all the details. It takes just a couple of minutes. These amazing braces have helped thousands of people in severe pain, and you may qualify to have yours delivered directly to your door at little or no cost to you. Call 1-800-282-6789 right now. This may be the most important call you make all year. That's 800-282-6789. Call now.
I use catheters, and if you do too, please listen carefully to this life-changing breakthrough. There is a new catheter that hurts less, and you can get a free sample by calling this number now.
Pain and urinary tract infections have been avoided by many of my patients. These new disposable catheters hurt less. It's an incredible new design that reduces pain. The eyelets are polished, so they glide smoothly and effortlessly across your sensitive skin. The old catheters would scrape and cut, causing pain and infections.
These new catheters are totally different, so smooth and painless. They changed my life.
Call now and get a free sample. Medicare and your insurance will pay for up to 200 of these catheters per month, all at little or no cost to you. Medical Direct Club handles all the paperwork with your doctor and includes lifetime free shipping when you call and join. Membership is free. Call now and get your free sample and painful cathing today.
Attention hip replacement patients. Several metal-on-metal hip implants have been recalled, and a jury recently awarded $8.3 million to one hip replacement victim.
Metal-on-metal hip implants can cause excruciating pain and may require expensive surgery to replace. If you had a metal-on-metal hip replacement and it's been removed or it needs to be removed, call the Goldwater Law Firm right now.
I'm attorney Bob Goldwater. Metal-on-metal hip replacements can be dangerous. If you have a metal-on-metal hip implant, even if it hasn't failed yet, call us right now. You may be entitled to substantial compensation.
The manufacturer of your defective hip implant should have to pay for your medical expenses and your pain and suffering.
Your time to act is quickly running out, so call us right now.
If you have a metal-on-metal hip replacement and it's been removed or is causing you problems,
Call 1-800-540-9516. That's 1-800-540-9516.
Welcome back. You're listening, watching the Renegade River Show. My name is Mike Hewitt, and in the studio with me today, my guest is Dave Agema, who is Michigan's Republican National Committee man to the RNC, and on the line with us is Norm Hughes. Norm is chair of the Michigan Conservative Plan and also Michigan Freedom to Work. Gentlemen, when we left off, we were talking a little bit about some legislative activities, specifically Medicaid, the Medicaid expansion. And Dave, I want to give you a minute to hop in on that topic.
Medicaid expansion, first of all, I want people to know we're not against helping people that are in need. But what Medicaid expansion has kind of a backdoor approach that most people are not aware of. I think it increased your ability to get Medicaid to 130% of the poverty level. And Norm, you might correct me in here, but a family, husband and wife with 4 kids, I think qualifies for Medicaid now, about $90,000 or somewhere in there. Is that
very close to that? Yes.
Okay, so what happens here is the government will help pay their medical expenses and so forth. And by the way, more people I think have signed up now for Medicaid than they have for the Obamacare.
Yeah, by far.
But so what happens is they sign up for that. What the backdoor approach is, what Obama's going to do is those people that are making $90,000 a year, by the time their life comes to an end, they'll probably own a house, or probably own a cottage somewhere. They'll have cars. They'll have other things. They'll have assets. The government under that program will come back and try to get that money back that they spent on Medicaid. People don't understand it. You're not going to be passing it on to your progeny when you're done. the government's going to come and take it if you're on that Medicaid. That to me, people don't understand that. It's a backdoor approach for the government to get more of your wealth.
Well, the worst thing is it not locks them into an inferior health care system.
Yes.
Private pay and health savings accounts have been extremely successful in holding down costs. There is no transparency in medicine. You can't find out the cost of a drug if you're insured until you actually take delivery on it. And you could have two clinics side by side with double the cost in one with inferior results, and you'd never know it. So we need more transparency in there. As far as Medicaid expansion goes, I would remind the listeners, Mike, that hospitals do not pay any property taxes.
That's correct.
Or income taxes or sales taxes, and that savings for decades, not only in Michigan but throughout the country, was designed to be able to take care of the indigents. So the hospitals are already getting that money, millions of dollars a year in some cases. The Wexford Hospital is an example that went to the Supreme Court. They had one patient one year and two or three another year, and they were saving hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. And then they double dip when they charge $500 for an aspirin or $1,000 for a wrap in a hospital, with the idea that they would recover that money, not remembering they've already got the money for the tax benefits, and so they bilk the people who are private paid and self-insured, and now they're going to triple dip through Medicaid expansion. So I think what we saw in here is a particular industry whose leaders felt it was good to be greedy and to soak the taxpayers for their benefit. I reminded them they were putting this on our kids and grandkids through increased deficits, and that eventually have to be paid, but it was about money.
You know what's unfortunate about that, gentlemen, is that here recently, over the last few months, I've had one of the state representatives that helped advance Medicaid expansion within the House, and I also had a senator that voted in favor of it here on this show. And both of them seem to articulate that this is a more efficient way of paying for folks that don't have insurance rather than through the emergency room. And the irony to that is that neither of them address the fact that the hospital is already getting significant benefits in the form of tax credits and in a lack of property tax. But both of them literally couldn't answer when I explained to them or I presented to them the math. And the math is that if you look in 1965 at the cost of health care and follow that cost straight forward to now, it has risen exactly as the rate that Medicaid its use has risen. So the hospitals use Medicaid because they're paid lesser. They use that as an excuse to increase the prices of the rest of the things that they're selling. I think it's a product, so people aren't used to using the term selling, but that's really what it is.
And a better solution to that problem, we talked about that. I chair Department of Human Services, which is very closely connected with Department of Community Health. Senator Caswell and myself talked about this, and we tried to get something going. We could never get it through. But what we need is a policy for the working poor. So in other words, a very minimal amount of money that costs them per month, but it at least allows them to go to just a private physician rather than the emergency room. I think that's a different way of doing it rather than have government do it. By the way, if the government's going to do anything, I hate the IRS, but the IRS hasn't done anything really well. Now we're going to give them charge of Obamacare. This just doesn't seem right to me. It just seems like a major problem and another fiasco that's going to occur.
It's almost like they said, what would be the worst department to handle this? And that's where we're going to go. Gentlemen, if we can, let's change gears a little bit. Dave, where are you at on prevailing wage?
Well, I saw what prevailing wage, first of all, the people out there know what prevailing wage is. For example, I had one of my constituents in Coopersville that bid on a job in Detroit. Well, if they go to here, he's probably paying $18 to $20 an hour. It's a pretty good wage. But when he went to Detroit, I forget what the number was, $35 an hour. And the purpose of that was to protect the union workers in Detroit. So he had to pay $35 an hour. And it got so ridiculous that when he basically drove his people to Detroit, he said, well, I don't want you just sitting there for no reason. He just paid him the regular wage. And when he got there, he paid him the prevailing wage, which was higher than it should be. And they took him to task for just paying $20 an hour while they're sitting in the car driving over there. So what that costs is to society is huge, just in schools, building your schools and so forth. I don't have the exact number. I used to have it. But it's costing us hundreds of millions of dollars in excessive costs when we go prevailing wage. It should be.
Michigan schools alone, it's about $246 million a year increased cost.
Yep.
And you think about what that could do to repair the roads the governor wants to repair.
Who could blame them for wanting to make all of Michigan look like Detroit?
Yeah, and now you just said another one there. You just said another one, Norm, and I chair transportation, so I know about that one. If I have $200 million in the state of Michigan, and I spend it on a road, I can go to the feds, and they collect 18.4 cents a gallon for every gallon of gas that we buy, and it gets sent to Washington, and then they decide what they want to give us back. Generally, I get a 4-to-1 match. So if I spend $200 million on a road, if they got the money, Federal Highway Administration, I can get $800 million. Well, add the $200 million to $800 million, that's $1 billion. So everybody says, oh, you got to come up with all this extra money. I said, out of a $50 billion budget that we have in this state, and by the way, when I got in office, it went from a roughly $39 billion to $51 billion now, just in 6 or 7 years later.
That was during a period of time when the population was shrinking.
And, yep, if you would just prioritize the spending. That's what I've been after forever. Prioritize the spending and say, what's the most important, what's the least important? When the government shut down, they said they were going to shut down non-essential services. Great. You just identified what's not essential. But I can find in a $50 billion budget, 4 or 5 or even $600 million multiplied times 4. Of course, the Federal Highway Administration may not have that much. But you can come up with the $1.2 billion to fix your roads without a tax increase, I believe.
To me, it was just a flagrant. The goal wasn't the roads; it was to raise the tax.
Well, yeah. If you're going to use that tax, then you can use that other money that you would have used for roads somewhere else where you can spend it. Government has one propensity, and that's to increase in size and expenditure. You give them the money, they're going to spend it. If you give them $1, they'll spend $1.25.
Well, that's what all entities want to grow, and the government isn't any different. To me, it's just a lot of folks won't look at it that way.
Yeah.
So prevailing wage, what would that do? Would that cap it? Would it eliminate it? What would it do?
Well, if you eliminated prevailing wage, just like Norm just said, you would save hundreds of millions of dollars for the Michigan taxpayers.
So the idea is just to strike down that law.
I will tell you, Mike, I've got a brother who has a moving and installations company that does union and non-union and union prevailing wage and non-prevailing wage, and it costs him $17 an hour more to pay the same union man when he goes on to a job for a university or something, as what it does for a union job in the private sector. $17 an hour. There's a lot of people be happy to work for that, let alone that being the cost difference that goes to the unions and whoever manipulates these programs.
No question about it. Listen, gentlemen, we've only got 3 minutes or so to go, and I want to use that time, if I can, to have you tell me about part-time legislation. Where is that at right now?
Okay.
Where are you at with
We went to the
idea?
Board of Canvassers with that. We're going to have our petitions ready to go by Tuesday. Again, when I was in the state representative job, I saw all the time we wasted. The only thing required by the Constitution of the state of Michigan is have a budget. Everything else is somewhere else. And you have about a quarter of people, maybe a little more, working on appropriations. The rest of them are making laws. So in my opinion, it's a good idea. You'll have less laws and regulations. And that basically will say it's going to make a part-time legislature like 92% of the other states have, pay them $35,000 a year. They're going to be in session 60 consecutive days by reason. If they have to, they can go an extra 30 if they vote on it. However, the incentive will be, we don't want to spend more time because we're only getting $35,000 a year. They'll want to get the budget done and get everything done they can. We limit their staff to 250 people because I know from experience, when I was not in Lansing, I would tell my people, I had 2 staffers, make sure one person is here at least to answer the phone for constituents. The other one would go home. So imagine this, if they're only there 60 days or 90 days, you don't need all those staffers sitting there. And imagine what this would do with your lobbyists. They got a real problem now. These other people have to have a job in the real world. How are they going to get to them all? And they're going to listen to the constituents more than they will the lobbyists.
I got to tell you, the concept of 148 people sitting around trying to imagine what bill they can generate so they can get their name popped up in the newspaper, that is just a crazy way to run a government to me.
I remember a time in the late 70s, early 80s when you had 4 legislators sharing one secretary in a portable out behind the Capitol. Now each one has 3 or 4 in their Taj Mahal headquarters overlooking the Capitol. And the way we've blown out money and raised up a class of princes who believe they're entitled to more and better is pretty outrageous to me.
I think that's part of the reason, too, Norm, that some of the the state reps and senators are angry with me as well, because I've always purported a part-time legislature, and I actually had that resolution in for several years when I was there, and it was never allowed to vote. It would require a 2/3 vote, but they will never vote themselves out of a full-time job. So the only way it's going to pass is a referendum.
Listen, the irony of that is that a lot of folks will campaign when they're trying to become state legislators.
Yeah.
They're all about part-time When they get there, they get amnesia.
Oh yeah.
I said, wait a minute, I thought you said you were for this. So listen, we've only got about a minute left. Is there a place that folks can go to find out more information on prevailing wage and part-time legislation?
Well, part-time legislature would be a part-time MI, PART MI.com, parttimemi.com. Just go right to that. You can go there. We're going to need people to get signatures, folks. We're short on money. We're going to need individuals to go out and get those signatures. I don't know about the prevailing wage. How about you, Norm?
Well, prevailing wage is going to be carried by Michigan Conservative Union. They have a website, michiganconservativeunion.com. Also, Michigan Freedom to Work. Their website is www.laborfreedom.com. They're the grassroots groups that will be carrying this. As you wrap up, Mike, I'd like to, if I can, remind people of John Adams's warning. He said, "A constitution of government once changed from freedom can never be restored.
Yep.
Liberty once lost is lost forever." So what's at stake here is America's future, and what it's going to be is up to you and me. So I would encourage the you to be involved as the me and we are in becoming a precinct delegate, going to your school board meetings, going to your local and county government meetings, contact your state legislators, be in touch, and tell them less government is that the best government is that which governs least.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, listen, thank you very, very much, both of you, for joining the show today and for everything that you do.
My pleasure.
I appreciate you both. Thank you, folks. We'll see you next Sunday.
Brought to you by Renegade River.
Are you one of the many Americans who undergo CPAP or BiPAP therapy? How often are you replacing your masks and hoses? Replacing your CPAP or BiPAP supplies every 3 to 6 months is critical to an effective therapy. Bacteria will build up, making you sick, and worn-out straps cause leaks and are just plain uncomfortable. Let Allied Medical Supply Network help. Call Allied Medical to speak to an expert agent that will determine which supplies you need and will set up a schedule for your fresh, brand-name supplies to be delivered right to your door, right when you need them. Shipping's absolutely free, and you may qualify to receive supplies at little or no cost to you. That's right, there's no driving around town or remembering when to order. Call Allied Medical Supply Network today and rest easy.
Call 800-560-7631. That's 800-560-7631.
There is a new catheter that hurts less, and you can get a free sample by calling this number now.
Pain and urinary tract infections have been avoided by many of my patients. The eyelets are polished, so they glide smoothly and effortlessly across your sensitive skin. Medicare and your insurance will pay for up to 200 of these catheters per month, all at little or no cost to you.
Call now for your free sample. It will arrive with a complete 90-day order, and if it doesn't reduce your pain, we'll pick them up for free.